Hi, I'm State Senator Joe Markley, standing here in the Senate chamber on Thursday afternoon. Obviously, we're not in session, but I feel like I'm returning to the scene of the crime because we were in session for a long day yesterday and a notably ineffective one. We went into session probably in the early afternoon, and we're here until nearly 10 o'clock, mostly in recess, and in all that time took up only one bill. I think that when I was, because of the tie that we have in the Senate, 18 to 18, it was necessary for us to come up with a power sharing arrangement. And the real question in control of the Senate is who gets to set the agenda, who gets to decide which bills will be brought up for action. Because it's not something an individual senator can do. I often have to explain to people, I can't get on my feet and demand that a bill be voted on. Only the leadership, and traditionally the majority leader, gets to set the calendar of bills that we will take up in any given day and the order that we'll take them up. Arrangements were made to try to come up with a way that both Democratic priority bills and Republican priority bills could be brought up for a vote. And what happened yesterday was a kind of a breakdown of that scheme, a feeling on our side that the Democratic bills were being brought up and the Republican bills were being ignored. When the session started, I was asked how I thought that this power sharing arrangement would work. And I said at that time I thought every day would be different. There'd be days when it worked just fine and days when it didn't work at all. Yesterday was one of the days it didn't work at all. We will be back in session Wednesday of next week, so we'll give it another try. And I rather suspect that, as often happens when you've had a problem, people have some time to figure out how to get around it. I think things will go more smoothly next week. And another thing I might say that I think you'll understand is the actual business of passing bills is important only insofar as the bills are worth passing. There's an awful lot of business we do that might be marginally good, but I don't think is necessarily going to determine the fate of the state of Connecticut. And so a day without passing anything or with passing only one bill is not necessarily a bad thing in my opinion. I often say I wish we would do less and do it better. And maybe this situation is going to force us to do less. Obviously, the big question is not what bills are being passed, but whether we can get a budget put together. And that is the matter of negotiation going on right now between the governor's office and the four caucuses: Senate Democrats, Senate Republicans, House Democrats, House Republicans. And my understanding is the parties are going to bring their proposals to the table and start to try to see if they can come to some kind of arrangement. All I can do is make my opinions known to my leader, who's representing me in these negotiations, and discuss it with my colleagues in the Senate caucus, and then hope that I get a document that I can support. In any case, at some point, there'll be an up or down vote on some budget, and I hope it happens before June 7th, which is our deadline. If we don't get it done by June 7th, the next deadline really is July 1st, because that's when the current budget expires. If we weren't to make it by that deadline, there is no deadline, and things could stagger on for quite a while. My own feeling, as I've said before, is we're not going to know any more on June 8th than we know on June 6th. So there's no reason for us to go past the deadline except the will to come to an agreement. And that agreement might involve all parties together. It might be a Democratic budget with only Democratic votes. It could be a Republican budget with a couple of Democratic votes. I don't know what it will be. I hope it's a budget that finally confronts our spending problem and cuts spending and cuts the size of state government instead of raising taxes. One thing did happen yesterday that I think I want to discuss, which is the Republican senators held a press conference to talk about our objections to the toll proposals which are floating around. And I'll take a second to talk about tolls. So if you've heard this spiel already, you can shut it off now. But otherwise, let me lay out what I think about the proposal. One reason I'm interested is because so many people who are friends of mine and good conservatives and sensible folks otherwise seem to think that tolls would be a good idea. What we laid out at the press conference was this. First of all, we have to remember that we're getting over $200 million a year from the federal government because we took the tolls off the roads. If we put the tolls back on, we lose that money, which comes to us for transportation, but essentially with no strings attached, out of federal highway gas tax money. The other thing is we get, contrary to what many people believe, interstate truckers passing through Connecticut are obliged to pay us a mileage fee based on their logs of the truck travel. And that, in the most recent year, amounted to over $30 million. So we get essentially about $250 million, which we would lose if tolls went into place. So you say the first $250 million would just get us up to zero. The second thing, of course, is that there's a cost to the tolling system, not simply the physical installation, but the bureaucracy that will have to exist to collect the tolls. It'll be if it's put back in, it would be like Massachusetts has, where they either you have an easy pass or they take a photograph of your car's license and send you a bill. But obviously that's an expensive procedure. People from out of state are going to ignore those and require collection efforts and so forth. So that will be part of the cost of collecting that tax. The third thing I want to say about that is, so much of the sentiment for tolls among people that want it is based on the idea that we can get money from out-of-state people. Yet the Department of Transportation says the very highest amount of people from out of state that are on our highways is 25%. So 75% or more of the total toll revenue would come from Connecticut residents. I think this is a new tax, and I'm not in favor of raising taxes, as you know. I don't think that's the answer to our problems. And there's no way that it's going to be imposed that isn't going to be painful. The federal government won't allow us to put the tolls exclusively on the borders. And if the tolls come back, they won't be just on I-95 and the Merritt. They will be on highways throughout the state. I read the report that the DOT commissioned to study the possibility of tolling. And that proposal said toll stations, these electronic platforms, would be set up something like every 4 miles, and they would be on all our highways. Not just 95, but 84 and 91 and 72 and 691 and 8 and 9, 15, every number you could think of, if it's a limited access highway, is going to have tolls on it. And how high is the toll going to be? The two numbers that they proposed in this study were 10 cents a mile and 20 cents a mile to get the kind of revenue that they need to make it worthwhile. Let's think about 20 cents a mile. If you live in Southington like I do, it's 20 miles to Hartford. So I do a 40-mile round trip when I come up here to the Capitol. If I have to pay 20 cents a mile, 40 miles, that's $8 a trip. If I'm doing that every day, 5 days a week, it's $40 a week. It's $2,000 a year to commute from Southington to Hartford if we put the tolls back on. It's going to be serious money. We'll be sorry we did it. I'm not for it. And there's no real plan out there to do it. This was one of the points that was made at the press conference yesterday. The people right now that are talking about let's put tolls back on are talking about something that has not even been figured out yet. So there's no plan to vote on. It's just a matter of saying, let's do tolls. What we get, we won't like. So my message is, if you're thinking that tolls are a good idea, please think again. If you think they're a bad idea, please let your legislators know that. Let them know that we have to come up with a budget that balances, that gives people a chance to get out from under the burdens that are killing this economy and that doesn't raise taxes. That's what I'll be working for up here when we get back to work. Good to talk to you. I appreciate your attention, and I'll be back next week with another update.